Navigating an SAP transformation? We get it. By day, we work hands-on with people like you across the globe. By night, we share what actually works. Welcome to Transformation Every Day with Alexander Greb and Johannes Languth, where your complex transformation becomes clear, actionable, and achievable.
Welcome everybody. My name is Alexander Greb and you're listening to Transformation Every Day, the podcast where we decode what it takes to lead real change in a world moving faster than ever. In this episode, we sit down with one of the most thought-provoking minds in the world of leadership, work and transformation, Rishad Tobaccowala. Rishad is the author of Restoring the Soul of Business and the newly released Rethinking Work. He spent decades guiding organizations at the end of disruption. And today, he brings his signature mix of clarity, candor and challenge to our studio at SAP's Newtown Square Experience Center. You'll hear why he believes transformation starts not only with tech, but with truth, and why companies that fear change may already be writing their own endings. We unpack hybrid work, AI, the talent economy, and what it really takes to lead people in a world without playbooks. Companies don't change, he says, people do, and those people are watching. Let's get into it. Here's my conversation with Rishad Tobaccowala.
Great. It was a train ride from Manhattan to here. 1.5 hours.
That's quite quick.
It is. It's the Acela train. It leaves there. I left at 8:12 and I got here at 9:27.
So you will return the evening?
Tomorrow morning, 8:12, back at 9:20. It's sort of interesting. 8:12 in the morning, get back at 9:27 in the morning, go. My daughters live in Manhattan, go there, and then in the afternoon, with my wife, we go to Panama City, because I'm doing an event in Panama City, Panama, on Thursday.
That's awesome. And we're recording Digital Transformation Every Day. My name is Alexander Greb. We have a very, very special guest today. I'm very, very honored to have here in Newtown Square in SAP's HQ, in the Experience Center. How to call you correctly? You're the protagonist of the Rethinking Work movement.
Basically say I'm a provocateur. I basically ask provocative questions and suggest frameworks and new ways of thinking about the future of work. I don't have the answer, but I try to get people to think about what the answer might be by providing some perspectives, points of views, and plans of action, which hopefully will get them to a better blueprint for themselves, their teams, and their company.
Absolutely. Rishad Tobaccowala.
Yes,
Great
perfect.
to have you here.
Thank you.
I read your new book lately, and I also got a very, very nice present from you, the signed version of it. When you approach a project like that, writing a book, how are your steps?
So the steps are very simple, which is, this is my second book, and I myself have not gone through childbirth, but my wife has. And after our first daughter, she said, I'm not going to have any more. This is too painful. So after my first book, I said, no more. It's too painful. And we had 2 daughters, and this is my second book. So the process really is 3 steps. The first is, what should I be writing about? And that comes because I write a free Substack every Sunday, and I begin to see what resonates. And I usually write where something either resonates or I believe that I have something new to add to the world out there. So the idea is there something new that I have to say? And does that, when I try it on my Substack, does it resonate? Because I could have something new to say, but people will say that's pretty stupid, so I'm not interested. So that's how I came to Rethinking Work, which is I was trying to get people initially to think about a very narrow thing, which is return to the office, to think about it differently. But as I did research, I said, that actually isn't the big issue. There are lots of other issues. So that's the first, decide on the topic. The second one, once you decide on the topic, is you put together a book proposal. I have an agent, and I put a book proposal together, and then we go shop it. And I was fortunate that the company that published my first book, HarperCollins, decided they were going to publish my second book. So that was easy. And then comes the hard part, which is you have to write it. And the difference is this book versus last book is this book I used a AI helper to help me write it. 5 years ago, I did not have an AI helper to write it. Interestingly, the AI helper, and the way I write my book is while I write my book myself, I have a book coach. That's how I get big companies like HarperCollins to buy the book, because they say, okay, you have something to say, you know how to write, but I don't know if you know how to write a book. So if you have a book coach, not a ghostwriter, someone who helps you along, we are more likely to get a manuscript that looks like a book versus a manuscript that looks like random thoughts you have. So my book coach, what he does is he says, remember we wrote this as the first chapter in our book proposal, because he works with me in the book proposal. Don't write about this chapter. So the first chapter is, let's say, societal changes. He says, don't write about societal changes. Answer these 8 questions instead. So I write out the answers to 8 questions. Well, he's asked me 8 questions. So I go to Anthropic and OpenAI and Gemini and Microsoft, and I ask the same 8 questions. And I see what the answers are. Now, I don't do deep interrogation, because obviously you can do a whole bunch of, I just look at the answers. And then I say, okay, that gives me thoughts that I'd not had before. Now put that aside and I then answer myself. Then I send the coach my answers, and I send the AI answers. So in this book, we haven't used one single line of AI answers. So it's AI influenced, but not AI written. It's AI influenced in the fact that I read AI answers to the questions before I started writing my answers. Does it make sense?
That makes perfect sense.
So that's sort of so this is this AI plus HI, which I talk about, which is very important. And that's like the third process of writing it. And after that, there's actually a fourth step. So the book is out. So it's like, okay, you give birth to a book. But that simply means the book is out. Now, how do you get people to read it? So then I go on 8 weeks before to like 8 months after, I became a book salesperson. So we're talking about this book, right? So this is one of my book salespeople sort of mode. And so I work very hard at selling the book. And my books do well. My first book did well, and my second book seems to be doing better at this stage, which is 3 weeks in, but we'll see, is because I've recognized that to have a successful book, the first is you have to have a book that has some good stuff in it, which I think this one has. So it's very hard to get a book with useless stuff in it selling, okay? Especially if you're not like Taylor Swift or something like that. She could write, I don't know, 2 snails on a worm and she could sell it, but that's different, right? The second is you have to market it like crazy. And the book is written in such a way that I market it to different groups of people. So I can talk about finance with one group, I can talk about another group with another group. And the third, which is very, very important, is you utilize a network to help you. So for instance, I'm here at this SAP event because I've spoken previously at SAP events. So they said, come back this year and speak about your new book, right? So in effect, because the book, Rethinking Work, the topic is important for everybody. So in effect, your marketing is really using your network, selling like a crazy person, and making sure you have a good product in the first place.
Absolutely. But I think, to be honest, that you are invited so often is interesting, because people should be quite scared about you in certain areas, because it's not like you are one of those who mushroomed out from nowhere in LinkedIn and talking now about new work, but you have been at the forefront of this movement since years and decades. But this is not something what you wrote in the book, which probably was your point already 30 years ago, but I guess it evolved. It came from somewhere.
It definitely evolved. So the idea really was, very quickly I began to realize that successful companies tended to have the same characteristics. So the first characteristic that they had was a very united and aligned management team. They might disagree, but they would eventually align. And while they would disagree in front of each other, but in the outside world, they would back each other, right? So the whole idea, it wasn't like they're singing songs and saying you're fantastic. They would fight.
Yeah.
But once the fighting was over, they went, and whatever was agreed is what everybody did. So it was aligned, diverse aligned talent, diverse perspectives. The second was a very clear purpose and mission, so everybody in the company knew what direction they were heading in. And the third is a disproportionate share of talent in the industry. So better talent than most of the other people. And the fourth, which I mentioned three, but there's a fourth. The fourth I don't pay as much attention to, but is very important, is okay financial statements. Okay, so if you've got massive debt and you're about to go out of business, those first three don't help you much.
Yeah.
But let's assume everything's around the same. Those are the three big differentiators. And it was the talent thing that got me to understand, okay, so how do I get a disproportionate share of talent inside a company? And then it became clear to me, it's basically how do I align my company to both meet my clients' needs, but also my talent needs? And the answer is no one size fits all. So I have to think differently. COVID forced us all to think differently. And we all basically went home. We all started working virtually, and it was a census. It was everybody. And the world did not collapse. People did die. There was a lot of other things. But the world did not collapse. It went on. And the economy did fine, and productivity went up in companies. And had nothing to do with whether it was inflation or government spending. Productivity went up across all kinds of companies. So it became clear to me when people said, okay, now let's go back. I said, wait, we've just did a grand experiment. And a lot of leaders say, I want to do A/B testing. I want to do data-driven experiments. We did a 3-year data-driven experiment. And unless you're like crazy, you come up with a very interesting answer that in 7 out of 10 cases, the hybrid model is more likely to succeed in the future than a completely remote or a completely 5 days in the week. And then you move off the hybrid model to either completely remote or 5 days, depending on your client needs and depending on your talent needs and depending on what the competition is doing. But you kind of start by saying the future isn't 100% remote. It isn't 100% inside the office. It's some mix of the two. All the data supported that. But people were not willing to accept that. And that got me to think even more about the topics in my book. But it also got me to say, I built careers and I built companies following a flexible model. And why is everybody talking flexible agility and personalization, but they don't do it when it comes down to their talent and the way they work? And that's the big insight behind this book, which is the world has changed. You should actually rethink what you're doing and how you're doing it and not just go back to muscle memory.
Absolutely. And I think what's so interesting about this kind of topic, from a perspective of SAP and the SAP ecosystem, we are developing products, enterprise applications. We are implementing enterprise applications. But from my point of view, it's still too much focused on somebody who sits in an office, front of a desk, in front of a computer. How do you think the way we change working will affect the software industry like SAP?
So I would anticipate, unless something very untowards happens, and this isn't dependent on what politician is in charge, this isn't dependent on whether the stock market is up or down. So this is irregardless of who runs a country, who runs a company, and what the financial markets are, outside of things going completely haywire, right? It's everything. So in that, I will make a prediction. Companies are going to work much faster than they have before. Companies are going to be far more distributed than they have before. Companies are going to have a greater mix of products and services and types of employees than they've ever had before. At the same time, they have to find a way to balance, unite, and integrate all of those that makes money. What sort of systems will help them do that? So a much more mobile, much more distributed, much more complex, much more faster landscape. But the key is distributed, mobile, and highly networked. What sort of company? That's the future company. And that company organizationally will likely have more of its work and more of its talent outside of the full-time company than it is inside the full-time company. So you could have world-class companies with 2 out of 3 people not even working full-time for the company. Mm-hmm. And you still have a company, world-class, because that might be the model that attracts the best talent, keeps your prices the best, and is the most agile. And that is the big variation, I think, that a lot of people are not putting their minds around, which is talent as an asset, as a flexible asset, versus talent as a cost that you have to make yes and no decisions, is where the future is. If I can basically say, you're not a cost, you're an asset, I don't have to decide whether I hire you or I don't hire you. I can basically decide how much of you I want and when how much of you I want. And for you, after some adjustment, it may actually be better for you. Not for everybody, but it may be better for majority of people. Because in part, if the choice is between keeping a job, not keeping a job, or keeping a job with 65% of your pay and benefits, allowing to do 35% whatever else you want to do, is better than not having that as an option, right? Because if your option is 100%, which you would prefer, or 0, I'm not giving you a new possibility. The new possibility initially doesn't look like good because my bills are still high and I've got 65% of my income, but it's forcing me now to learn new skill sets. It could be that I'm making income in other places. It may be I so much appreciate my work, I want to go back to 100%. Or it says, by the way, this new model looks better and I want to go that 65%. So it's that which is very, very important, which is you have a flexible asset versus a non-flexible cost.
But do you think, or let's ask this question others, are enterprises and organizations already ready and prepared for that? Because so many salary models are 100 years old.
Yes, so what happens is the change will come slowly, not as slowly as people hope, but it won't be as rapid as people hope. And the reason it won't be as rapid, not as people hope, as rapid as people, like say a fervent zealous says this is going to happen in a year or two. So I basically said, look, the transition of work is going to take 10 years. So I just basically said between 2020 and 2030, work will change more than the previous 50 years. But I'm not saying in 2 months. It'll be a 10-year period, it'll happen. And the 2 reasons. One is, yes, the technology will be there, but the organizational design isn't. And so you have to rethink the organizational design, which is harder to do than the technology because it involves people. And people are messy. Technology is not messy compared to what people are. That's number one. Second is because it's about people and people are messy, people tend to adjust much slower than everything else. We tend to be on the majority, we tend to be change almost resistant as human beings. Because our basic belief is change means risk. And if I'm doing fine, why do I want to take risk? If I'm sitting nicely in my village and being fed well, do I want to go out into the jungle? Well, if you go out into the jungle, you might discover a better village. If you're in the jungle, you might actually kill an animal and you'll eat well. But if you go out in the jungle, an animal might eat you. If you go out in the jungle, you'll realize that there isn't anything like this and the door is closed for you to return. Yeah. So people tend to be much more, however much they say, well, we do whatever we want. Most people are resistant, and even if they're not resistant to change, their economic circumstances make them so, which is they've got children to support, a mortgage to do, And the whole stuff is like this: running out into the jungle will be good, but if I lose my home and I can't educate my kids, I'm not going to try that.
Yeah.
So you're right. What will basically happen is it'll happen slow. Now, however, and this is the big thing, what if you decide to go slow because you think it's going to take time? Then, in many cases, I believe that organization will get defeated. So I tell bosses, you will never be defeated unless you decide to defeat yourself. And one of the ways you decide to defeat yourself is you slow walk change. And if the change is happening really fast, and yes, the people and company is changing slower, that's fine. But that's not your only benchmark. Your benchmark also has to be how fast are the expectations of your customer changing, and can somebody else meet it faster than you? That's the real risk. So the real risk is not internal. So you might say, I know where I'm going. I've got to go slow and steady. It's going to take a lot of time. But what if there's people out there who go to your customers and say, I've got to get there in half the time? Now you don't have the time, right? And that's what a lot of people believe. I said, you don't actually control. And there are companies launching all the time who are now saying, hey, look, with AI, with marketplaces, with flexible work, I can create fantastic new companies and compete with these folks. And I can go in potentially with a better product, more customized service, and lower price. And that is what's happening, incredible. And in a very strange way, I don't run a business, right? But one of the things I do is I have a speaking career. And what I figured out is how to create a better product by myself, how to create a better product, which is what people tell me in ratings and rankings. So that's a better product, to deliver it in a completely personalized and customized way. So I will change the product and service depending on what the audience is and what the subject is. That's the second one, which I think is very, very important. So I'll give you a better product. I'll do it more customized. And I will significantly be cheaper than other people you can get this from. And I'll also be very fast responsive. So now you as a client have got a better product, moving faster, more customized, cheaper than this. How do I do it? I do it by basically, focusing on what I'm good at. The other is I eliminate all unnecessary cost structures. So I don't have teams. I don't need a team. I write my own stuff. I talk my own stuff. I don't understand why I need a team. I can make my own bookings and reservations, and I can manage my own calendar. I don't need to pay somebody to do that. As a result, my cost structure is lower. The second is I don't have an agent who charges between 20 and 30% markup. So the client basically says, I don't have to pay the markup. You have a lower cost structure. And as a result, you can charge literally half of what the equivalent of people like you charge. And the reality of it is, because I have a better product at a lower price, I get repeat business, so I don't even have to worry about it. So I end up having a much higher margin product. So I give a superior product, ends up with a higher margin, because my cost structure is low. Nobody says I need more people. If I added more people, I wouldn't deliver a better product. And that is something that's become very remarkable. There are new companies who are saying, if we start with a blank sheet of paper, how would we address this issue? That is the real challenge to organizations. Yes, organizations are slow to change. Yes, people are slow to change. But someone starting without the organizational structure doesn't have that, and then goes and attracts people who are wanting to do that, doesn't have people that are slow to change. So in effect, they could actually extract the best employees from your company and start and attack your company. That's why I come back to where my whole learning was, your company is only as good as your talent, assuming that you've got leadership that's aligned and you can tell a story. It's dependent on your talent.
Fully agree with that. But I think concerning the changes that you are referring to, what's very apparent at least in my home business. On the one hand, of course, consulting maybe always have been further on the front because the business model is different. You're traveling a lot and so on. So you are not there to be at the office all the time. In our twin, which is more or less the companies that make enterprise applications, things are a little bit different. And you see there conflicts happening at the moment because of that. You had the first big trigger, or one of the big ones was COVID. People were starting to work at home. And now that's what you say, from that 100% remote model. So many companies, and you read that in the news, are now going back
100% completely in the work. And that's why that to me makes zero sense. It makes zero sense because I've talked to CEOs of companies and I said, okay, if you were to start a company today, would it look like what you just are forcing people back into? Not one of them has said yes, right? But they said, we're not starting today. I said, your competition is. Why do you think your competition isn't starting today? They are. And I said, in most industries, you don't have big moats. You might have a moat of maybe a brand, but in most industries, you don't have much more of a moat. And what tends to happen is people actually use what you consider to be your moat to actually use it as a place to drown you. So your moat actually doesn't protect you. It drowns your future. It doesn't protect you from the future, right? Because people say, okay, we'll use this person's water in the moat to flood their castle, right? Versus anything else. And I think that is why I often tell people, is it really the office that people are not returning to, or is it you that they're not returning to?
The boss.
The boss. Okay? And I said, they don't like the zone of control. And I believe in in-person interaction, but why does it have to always be done in the office? And I could basically say, everybody, when you join my company, I put you in one of 3 boxes. And you tell me why you should not be in that box, and then I will adjust. But you'll be in 3 boxes. Box number 1 is for a certain period of time, I expect you to be in the office 5 days a week for the following reasons. You're new to the company. I want the first 3 months of training to happen in person before you go away. 2, your particular client requires 5 days of coverage physically. So we have to do that, which is number 2. 3, you want to do it. You've decided that you are not effective working from home. You've got too many distractions and you need to be in an office. Okay. It's better for you. We should do it. Clients need it. We should definitely do it if clients basically sort of need it. But otherwise, why are we doing it? If that makes sense? And that is the real trick for most people, which is I simply say, why? So I would start by saying so I'll say, all of you who are new to the company, I'm going to put you 1 in a box, which is I want you to start 5 days a week. 2, I'm going to put you in a box, which basically says we're going to have a hybrid model with 20% a month in the office or 25% of the month in the office. And we can decide whether the best way of doing that is 2 days out of 5 or maybe 40%, right? Or is it 1 week out of 4? And
there's so much gray. We're always talking just about black and white.
It's not black and white. So much gray. And then the third one is I'll put you in a bucket. So you either I start by saying you're in this bucket because you're working for a 5-day client or you're new. You're in this bucket. So you're in the central bucket because that's where most of the company is. And then I have an exception to those 2 buckets because you can work 100% remote because you're senior and you do that. You can work 100% remote because you have a family issue. You can work 100% remote because I'm competing for talent like you and my competitor is offering that and you like it and I don't want to lose you. So interestingly today, there was an article about Verizon and AT&T. So AT&T is forcing all their people to come back 5 days a week. So Verizon is basically sending those people emails where they can get their names or putting up billboards outside every AT&T office. We treat you like a grown-up. Apply for a job at Verizon. You'll have flexibility. And
That's
AT&T
a
starting
killer
to
pitch
lose
for
people.
recruitment.
Right. So my whole stuff is you work 5 days a week. What
Yeah.
you've done is, see, what I've always basically said is in a battle, you want to have as many tools to play a battle. Why are you closing down all your options? Like I've always basically believed as a strategist, one of the key things with strategy is make choices, but keep your options open. Okay? So what I'm doing is I'm not saying anybody can do whatever they want. I said the entire company has to be working 40% of the time is my base model, let's say. And we can decide whether it's 1 week or 2 days. But then I've got a up model of 5 days and another model of 0 days. But this is my base. And then these are my two flexes. But my flexes are for rational reasons. And now I can compete with anybody. I can compete with that. I can compete with anybody. And I'm very clear. It's not like anybody. So I said, and by the way, I can, if I want control as a boss, I can say, I'm putting you into this box unless you prove to me why you should not be in this box. I'm putting you in this box unless you prove to me why you shouldn't be in this box. And people can come back and say, here's why. And I can listen to them. So someone who's young comes back and says, I just don't feel like it. I said, it doesn't matter. Someone who's young comes back and basically says, I'm looking after my aging or sick mother, I can't. Okay, we make an exception for you. Okay, we'll put you in this box. That is what most managers aren't willing to do, or most leaders aren't willing to do. They're not willing to talk to their people. So my said is, just talk to them versus having these blanket announcements, right? And by the way, you can have a blanket. I understand you're like a 10,000 company. You can't talk to 10,000 people, but you tell 10,000 people I got 3 models. Okay, and this is how you all are being distributed. And talk to your bosses if for some reason you have a business rational or family reason versus I just don't feel like it.
Yeah.
Because if you don't feel like it, then you don't want to work here.
Exactly.
But I'm giving you a little bit of flexibility before I say it's my way or the highway.
Absolutely. And I think it's very important to see what you said with the many tools that you should have in your box. Also, people's situation, life situation, and changes quite quickly. Yes. When you are single, when you have no kids, you're 100% flexible. When you have kids, it can mean that either you have to be at home or you do not want to be at home.
Yeah, and you have those two choices. So you basically say, I got kids, I want to work 5 days a week from the office because they're driving me crazy. Right?
When my kids come at home, it's every time like it sounds like an org invasion.
Yeah,
I tried not to have customer interaction.
Yeah, and so you do that, right? So that's and it's so simple when I explain to people.
Yeah.
If you can solve for clients and you can solve for talent, what else is there to solve for, right? And too many managers are solving for themselves. I said, nobody cares about us. We have talent that creates great things to clients who pay us. So I think we need to listen to clients and we need to listen to talent.
When you are looking at companies from an outside perspective, what would be your top warning signs that you identify and see that an organization, a culture is not ready for that new kind of work?
There are many warning signs. The first and biggest warning sign is any company that I sense operates with fear as a major motivator. And fear is a feeling, and you find it actually not necessarily in how somebody is working and where they're working. It's the inability. It was in my first book. I had a chapter called The Turd on the Table, which is you sit around in the conference room. There's a piece of shit in the middle of the table. Nobody calls it that. They all pretend it's a brownie. Okay? That organization is the first type. So it's basically an organization where nobody actually speaks up. Nobody tells the truth. All the meetings take place outside the real meeting room. So it's an organization built on fear. And those organizations are, to me, the beginning of the end of organizations. And the reason is an organization built on fear ends up with 3 major red marks against it. One, world-class talent doesn't tend to work all the time with fear. A little bit of fear once in a while is fine. But if you're always working with fear, world-class talent doesn't like that. They like going in. Sometimes you have to be scared if you're losing a client, I better do something. I'm not doing a good job. But if it's like, oh my God, this is a fear-filled organization, it doesn't work. So they leave. So you have a talent issue. The second is you have an innovation issue. Because innovation, which is very fundamental to companies, only happens through risk-taking and making mistakes. But if you're a fear-filled culture, why would somebody do that? That's the second reason. And the third reason is you don't get the warning signs that your category has changed. So I'll give you an idea. I'm a big fan of German cars.
Understandably.
Yes. So I love German cars, right? And I look at the German manufacturers and the US manufacturers, all of whom got amazing engineers, amazingly smart people who could design and build those amazing cars. Why is it that they were so late to electric and software? Why? Okay? And I'll tell you why. In part because people who were younger in the organization were not listened to, who basically said, there's a problem brewing. But they basically said, there is no problem brewing. Look how well we are selling, right? And they didn't look 2 levels deeper, which is, look how well we're selling now, but there's this new thing that's coming. And by the way, there are economies of scale with that. And if we keep not paying attention, these people have more data, better software, better guidance, better battery life, all of those kinds of stuff. That was one of the things. And the other reason is because it was inward looking, because most of these, whether it's US or German manufacturers, most of the people leading those companies were hardware engineers or salespeople. And the question that people had to ask was, is the future software versus hardware, or software and hardware versus hardware? Is the future electric plus, so it could be electrical and gas, which is hybrid, or is it just gas? And in the future, do you actually need to own a car or not? I'm a salesperson, I'm selling cars. How can I ask, do I have to sell cars or not? I'm an internal combustion hardware engineer. How do I basically believe that the future of this is going to be more software and electric or electric plus? So, those often is because nobody in the company says move quickly. Now, one of the things I did, and I'm not the only person, there were other people. And it's one of the reasons why people say, okay, you're not as crazy as you sound. So the company I work with, which is in the marketing services, we basically decided that we were likely to go out of business in 10 years because of the digital and technological world. And that if we didn't start changing, we would get into trouble. Now, we had leadership, the CEO and the board, who basically said, yes, we'll take a 10-year horizon. And yes, we recognize there's going to be some hits we'll take in the short run. Not we'll go out of business, but our margin might be lower, our growth rate might be lower as we invest in something else. And we'll make some mistakes when we're investing in that other thing. But we're going to do it. And we thought it would take 5 years. It took 7 or 8, primarily because of the people thing was much slower than we expected. And we, of course, made mistakes. But as a result of these changes, the company went from being a television, radio, analog, French, European-centric company to a digital, engineering-heavy, American-focused company in 7, 8 years. When this began, our market cap was about 50% less than the leading player and equal to the second player. 8 years later, our market cap is bigger than the first, second, and third combined. Because people said, oh my God, these people are actually positioned for the future. They're deeply technologically savvy, data-driven. We still do storytelling and we do all of the things, but we do it in a different way. We still have some of that history. That required leadership. That required investment, but that also required people like myself. And again, I'm not the only one who went to the board and eventually got on the board and said, I don't think we get it. We've got to hire new types of people. We've got to look at new types of models. We may be a container of the past. We have to think about something different. It's very hard when you're a leader to look in the mirror and say, I may need to replace myself or augment myself, not replace, but augment myself. And the people I'm augmenting with me have skill sets I don't have, and I just have to trust them and work alongside them. And I can't say those skills don't matter in the future. So you have to become somewhat a learning person, a respectful person, a reaching out person. And not every leader is capable. Very many leaders are, but not every leader is capable.
We're talking now about actual happening changes. But there's, in my opinion, also another dimension to it, because especially my industry, enterprise applications, technology itself, is often accused of having moved the needle in the last years from being engineering driven to being sales and marketing driven. And companies, for example, who are in this realm to change and to have to develop, have now developed for themselves, of course, a discipline which is called HR marketing. Yeah, marketing for the product has always been there and so on. You have to sell something. Sometimes you oversell it and so on. Sometimes you are spot on. But the same thing I see, for example, also in HR marketing. Quite often you oversell certain abilities and change in your company. And sometimes I think even HR marketing hinders this kind of development because it pretends and communicates to the outside and inside world, hey, we are so innovative. We are now on this journey. Do you think this is actually helpful, or do you think this is something that hinders the development of organizations?
So here's what basically happens is I think HR marketing and marketing in the organization is it's important. The key is what I've learned is there are three things that people make mistakes when they do this. The first is they believe telling people once is enough. So my belief is it's repetition. You got to repeat, repeat. Second is by making the mistake that telling people that change is easy. And my belief is change sucks. And it's not a question of whether you want to change or you don't want to change. The question is between change and irrelevance. So you have one painful door and a second more painful door. So there isn't this door is good, the change door is good. It's not like that. The change door is painful, but the irrelevance door is even going to be more painful, though it doesn't feel like irrelevance right now. So one is we don't tell our story enough and often enough. Sometimes we tell a story where we underestimate the time it's going to take and the pain it's going to take. And the third is show, don't tell. So I believe employees of an organization are like children. I'm not calling employees children, but they're like children. And what do children do? They do what their parents do, not what they say.
Absolutely.
Right? So their stuff is, if you do something, I'll follow that. If you say something and you do something opposite, I don't believe what you said. I'm just going to look at what you did. So for many people, the senior people don't eat their own medicine.
That's true. Fully agree.
So they have an HR policy, but for some reason they're not HR.
When you look about it in these kind of changes that are necessary and the best practices which have been condensed out to actually implement them and make them happen and not just stopping. Do you have one example where you say like, okay, this is where they had an approach, did not work out at all, remained like they have always been, and one example who did that correct, and what are the differences?
Sure. So I'll give you two examples. An example of where it didn't work out or hasn't worked out for a while. There's a company called Condé Nast. So for people, Condé Nast is a world-class publishing organization. They own magazines like Vogue, New Yorker, Vanity Fair. They were a big, great company. They decided the future was multimedia, and they wanted to invest and grow multimedia. And 5 years later, they was half their size, despite what they said they were going to do. And the reason is because they kept promoting people and giving power to people based on magazine page sales. So the strategy said multimedia. They bought multimedia companies, but the power and promotions and control was based on how many pages you sold. Because today's, so you incentivize the company to today, and you talked about the companies tomorrow. You didn't fund tomorrow. You didn't promote people for tomorrow. You did that for today. And you said tomorrow is we have, so we have an innovation team, but the innovation team was not on the board. The people who sold magazine pages got paid more than everybody in the innovation team. So people said, well, should I go work in the innovation team? I'm going to work in this. So that was an example. And the example basically is if your leaders don't change, your incentives don't change, and you don't provide people with training, nobody cares. So you have to basically say, why is this good for me? Why is it good for my pay? Why is it good for my growth? If you don't solve for that, it's no use having the right strategy. And that's what Condé Nast was. Similarly, one that has worked was basically, there's both the example in the software world, which is Microsoft with Satya Nadella, basically saying we're going to be open versus closed. We're going to be not Windows-centric. We're going to be cloud-centric. We're going to basically be partnering versus thinking we can do it all. And we're going to have a growth mindset versus a know-it-all mindset. Yeah. And that was one whole thing. But you can go to a simple other example. Most people know the Microsoft example. You have another example of something like Domino's Pizza. Domino's Pizza reinvented itself by basically saying, first, our pizza sucks. Second is the way we're going to differentiate once we have a pretty decent pizza is in the pizza logistics business. And we're going to ask ourselves, why do we deliver pizza only to people's homes when we know where they are? So why don't we deliver pizza to people's phones? Right? So you can be at a
park,
football party, you can be and we can deliver it that way. And if I have control over whether my pizza is coming or not, and it's going to be 30-minute delivery where it is, I feel that pizza is much more personalized because it's like sort of, getting my custom-made BMW coming out of Munich, right? I'm watching those. You can do the same thing for pizza.
Yeah.
But much faster and much cheaper.
Even putting pineapple on it.
Even pineapple on it. So those are sort of examples. And again, you'll find... It was a line I used at the event in San Ramon, which I think you saw on the tape. Companies don't change, people do. Yeah. Companies don't transform, people do. And usually people means leadership first because everybody watches the leader. That's why I think leaders are more important today than ever before. So I make fun of bosses, but I love leaders. And by the way, every leader has, as I said, a boss, like some boss things in it. But this is an age where leaders are rare. And you see this all over the world. Like even today in the United States, suddenly leaders aren't willing to speak up because they're scared. And their teams are watching them. As I remind them, I said, when things got tough, you got marshmallow-like. So when things get easy, they'll remember you were a marshmallow when things got tough. When then all of a sudden, you're as strong as a Snickers bar, firm. But now you become all gooey. Yeah. Right? That's not leadership. That means you don't have principles, you don't have values, you are money-tropic or fear-tropic, so you bend in that direction. I said, everybody watches it. And then you say like, oh, the next generation doesn't get it. I said, I think they get it. Their whole stuff is, I don't want to grow up to be like you.
Absolutely.
I'd like your money, I'd like your power, but I don't want to be like you.
And I think that's a privilege of each younger generation to be very critical on
They're very critical, but I'll tell you, one of the interesting things is obviously now I'm an older generation, so I should be basically a curmudgeon saying people that they don't get it. But I spend a lot of time, and it's not just with my kids, that's completely different, but a lot of other people. And I basically believe that there's nothing that basically tells me that young people aren't willing to hustle and work hard. All they're doing is they're asking simple questions, which is, can you tell me, A, how do I benefit versus just the company benefiting? Yeah. And B, I'm skeptical that the company is going to look after me, so I just have to have optionality. And there's no piece of data in the past recently that indicates the company will look after me. And the reality of it in the marketplace we're going into, it would be silly for a company to say, we will care for you like the Japanese system, which even Japan doesn't have. Yeah. Irregardless, we can't have that social contract because the world and competitive world set is moving. So what can you do? Mm-hmm. You can simply say, I'm going to create a workforce where I'm going to have the most adept, agile, and best talent, and do so in a way that I can go up and down, but always keeping in mind that you have options.
Yeah.
Right? That's a much more interesting way of talking to people by basically saying, my way or the highway, because my way or the highway means, I'll tell you what, you're going to end up with people who are unemployable everywhere else in your company.
Absolutely. And because you referred to the younger generation being critical, but I think what we overlooked quite a lot of times in the past was that the generation that is following us, they have observed us for a long time. When my 10-year-old daughter gives me feedback how she sees me working and so on, it's at times eye-opening and also painful.
It is definitely eye-opening because someone is looking from outside you. Yeah. And the other thing that they do is a lot of people say they have to pay their dues. So I said, okay, paying their dues means working with calculators and typewriters. Mm-hmm. But we're not living in a calculator typewriter world.
Yeah.
And the biggest challenge for organizations, I'll tell you, it's going to happen in the services business so fast and so dramatically. You're seeing it at the edges of consulting and law firm. If knowledge is going to go to zero, the cost of knowledge, not intelligence or insight and all of that, but the cost of knowledge is going to zero. Why do you have to spend 8 or 9 or 10 years learning those with case law as a lawyer when I can press a button and get all of that? So the idea of me spending time looking for cases and a whole bunch of other stuff and searching libraries, I can now get that immediately. So how many years do I have to be an associate before I get promoted? Mm-hmm. Similarly, at McKinsey and others, the number of partners are the same, and they sometimes last year they were delaying number of people who were coming in by 3 or 6 or 9 months because the demand was less. Mm-hmm. And my thing is, it's kind of interesting. In an AI world, the demand for AI consulting is at an all-time high.
Yeah.
But consulting companies are not growing at an all-time high, which means this part is growing, but there's another part. So obviously, one of the interesting things is do not ask for who AI comes. It comes for you, right? So it's like the do not who told for whom the bell tolls. And it doesn't come for you. It only comes for you if you decide what's AI going to do to me versus what can I do with AI. But that's one of the last things I always said, both even in the talk today, which is it's not just about efficiency and effectiveness. It's about rethinking your model.
But is it friend or is it foe of the typical white-collar worker?
I believe that if you do not adapt, embrace, and learn it, it is a foe that will kill you. It's a foe. Make no mistake.
Yeah.
If you adapt, embrace, and use it, it can be an augmenter to you. I'm not necessarily saying it's all completely friendly, but it can be an augmenter. So I would really believe AI should be thought of as an augmentation intelligence, augmenting your intelligence, or augmenting what you can do. But you have to watch it. And what it does also say, it's probably, even when you adapt and when you do all the stuff with AI, it's a foe to about 30 to 40% of your job. Mm-hmm. It's going to take away 30 to 40% of your job in most cases. But at the very same stage, it's going to make possible new types of tasks. And the thing that's going to happen in the future is we're not going to basically be casting for jobs. We're going to be casting for either jobs to be done, tasks, or projects. And all of us are going to be gig workers even inside a large company. We're going to go from gig to gig.
I did a few weeks ago, probably a little bit provocative LinkedIn post, but I wanted it to be to fuel a discussion. And I was, to be honest, quite surprised about the reactions, because when you have as an audience a lot of technical people who should know what AI could made for them and to them, you still got so many reactions. Won't change anything for me.
And the way I basically tell people is this, which is, tell me what you do. And I said, if you tell somebody who is pretty good at AI, tell them what you do, they will come back and start doing what you do, a third of what you do, without having any knowledge. That means it's going to affect your job. Yeah. So somebody using AI can replace a third of what you do much more cost effectively. Mm-hmm. That's impacted your job. And a lot of these are like running. I'll tell you, okay, you're a massage therapist, probably doesn't impact your job much.
True.
It'll impact your marketing, because some people may basically say, arrange a travel tour for me, including massage therapists. And so you have to have a different kind of SEO, SEM to talk to those agents. But otherwise, it doesn't affect your life that much.
Yeah.
If you're a knowledge worker, a white-collar worker, a technologist, it does.
Yeah.
Now, I don't believe that coders are going to be replaced. But what happens is just the code, if you look at the jobs just for coders, they've actually declined significantly because people are becoming more productive with things like GitHub and your technologies, SAP and other technologies, just becoming more productive. Yeah. And so at some particular stage, it's coming for everybody. So remember when we were young, we were told two things. You can future-proof your career by learning to code and by learning Mandarin.
Yeah, remember that.
Yeah? Okay. Today, you don't need to know Mandarin. Your Samsung phone translates in real time. Mm-hmm. Not that Mandarin isn't important, but you don't have to learn it for the reasons, which is like China's going to be a big economy. We have to correspond with them. Mm-hmm. You can do it now with a machine, so you don't need that. So that's number one. Now, that's not the same as knowing the Mandarin language and all the
culture.
But that's different. Okay, so that's number one. Second is, more and more people are learning or using code like Lego pieces. Mm-hmm. And increasingly, including the latest Claude 3.7, has very natural language coding going on. Mm-hmm. Again, I'm not saying coders won't be important, but a world-class coder with those tools will become twice as productive.
Yeah.
And if a world-class person who's already productive is twice as productive, it will probably require somebody less somewhere else in the organization.
Naturally.
Okay?
Yeah.
That's just what it is. Because, by the way, and the other is, the other mistake that companies are making, and this is somewhat revolutionary, and this is the closest I get to sounding like a revolutionary. Every company basically says, when I do AI with my talent, I will increase efficiency by 40%, and that'll help my bottom line. And the only little stick in the ointment here is I'm the person who's using AI who's becoming 40% more efficient. The 40% increase in productivity, why should you take it? Why shouldn't I take it? So basically means the productivity gains in AI are going to have to be split with the talent that uses the AI. If not, why would I do that? And see, it's the static state that leaders basically believe they're in control. And I said, you are not in control. The only thing that you are in control of is knowing you're not in control. Outside of that, you're not in control.
Now we're coming with back to your statement that your coworkers are like kids, because there's also the same as saying that you are not in control of your kids.
Yes.
Do not try to change him. Do try to be the
best you can. So you can align with them, and by showing very much with kids. So what can you, when people basically tell me, what advice do you have as a parent? So I said, look, every parent is different, every culture is different, every country is different. But I'll give you 3 things that I believe work for everybody. I'm not saying those are the only 3, but I say if you do these 3, you're halfway there. So what is number 1? Pay attention and give time to your kids. Right? Ideally, if you love them and you pay attention and give time to them, they like you, but they'll turn out to be better, which is number 1. Number 2, very important, invest in their education. And number 3 is give them diverse experiences. Travel, show them different things outside of what you have. And so they'll see lots of different things, so they won't just see you, but they do see you because you're spending time with them and you're investing in their education. And they'll grow up, and those 3 things nobody can take away from them. Your love, your education, and your experiences can't be taken away. Similarly, for talent, invest in their education. Treat them and respect their diversity, and show them with different sort of perspectives. If that makes sense, it makes sense.
Absolutely.
And third is listen to them and pay attention to them. I don't understand why people just don't do that. To your point, bringing up children is the same way as bringing up talent. Quite a few commonalities to the point you just made.
Absolutely. Rishad, to round up our very, very interesting conversation, what's one question that no one is asking but should be?
I believe the question that not nobody is asking, but sometimes they may not have the right answer, or they may not ask the question in the right way, is what is a good life? Okay?
Yeah.
So there's an entire question is what is success? And so I've tried to answer the question of what is success and what is a good life with a very single statement. Two lines. So I believe success is freedom to spend times in the way that give you joy. So if you have the freedom to spend time in the ways that give you joy, it's successful.
Absolutely.
Okay? Which means if you're a billionaire and what gives you joy is making the next billion and you're spending time doing that, perfectly fine. If you have money and you would prefer to spend time hiking and that's what gives you joy and you have the freedom to do that, perfectly fine. Go do that. So it's not your benchmark of success and my benchmark of success is simply time's the only thing we have, and if we have the freedom to spend it in the way we want, which obviously requires some economic and other things, makes sense. That's number 1. And what tends to be like, what is a good life? It was something that I sort of started with today in my presentation. A good life basically combines, if you can, some decent level of health, quality relationships, and meaning and purpose, ideally work, but some other meaning and purpose. And a lot of people basically start to think success is a number, success is a title, and success is what other people think about you. Yeah. And my answer to them is, when you care about what other people think about you, you live in their minds and not yours. Yeah. If you think success is a number, you've just basically given people a remote control on how to run you.
True.
Right? Which doesn't make basically sort of sense. Mm-hmm. And if you think success is fame, all I can basically tell you is none of your fans are going to be at your graveyard unless you die right now. Yeah. So you are spending your time tilting your life against meaningless things, thinking it's meaningful. And there's an ecosystem that is sometimes supporting your crazy thinking. So often, in addition to what is a good life or what is success, the question that I ask people, and I often get a kick in the pants, is what am I missing and do I have it all wrong? Mm-hmm. And once in a while, we got to ask people, like, maybe I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. And a lot of people will tell you, I don't think you know what you're talking about. So I said, talk to me about why I don't know what I'm talking about. So I got to where I am today. It's not because I don't know what I'm talking about. I know a little bit more than most other people about what I'm talking about, but there's a lot of other stuff I don't know what I'm talking about. Yeah. But my whole thing is, but I'm aware of that. So I often tell people, looks like what I just said made no sense. Can you explain to me why? Mm-hmm. And I think those are the three questions. What is success? What's a good life? And where am I wrong?
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Rishad, I'm so grateful about this conversation.
Well, thank you for inviting
It
me.
was absolutely enlightening. When people want to know more about you or
Yep.
learn more about you, they have the possibilities with your books like Rethinking Work. But what kind of
Sure.
websites, accounts?
The three places that people can get to know me better. One is I have a Substack, which is at rishad.substack.com. So it's rishad.substack.com. And I write a free newsletter. It's read by about 30,000 people every Sunday. It's completely free. So you can subscribe to that and get something free, which is number one. The other is I have a podcast like this called What Next, where I talk to different people about what's coming next in their industry, in their careers, and what they see. That you just type in What Next Publicist Group, and you'll find that in every platform. That also is completely free. And the third is I've written two books. One is called Rethinking Work, and one is called Restoring the Soul of Business. You can find the Restoring the Soul of the Business pretty much everywhere in the world. Rethinking Work right now for the next month. But by the time this comes out in late March, April, you will find it everywhere in the world. Right now, it just happens to be in India and the US, but it'll be across Asia and Europe by April beginning.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Rishad.
Thank you.
Have a great day.